Hello, this is Guy Finley, and I'm glad to be with you again, able to talk about the important topic that we're going to cover together. We're going to talk about how we can enter the place of power within. And there are going to be 3 separate talks, and each one of them is going to allow us to explore something that is more important today than perhaps ever before. So take a nice deep breath and let's get started. First, think along with me. What is the real root of any crisis in our life? Most of us probably have never thought of such a question, but it's important today, especially today. And isn't the root of any crisis that sudden sense of being powerless, a feeling as if the choices have been taken out of our hands, as if there's a future that's coming we may or may not have any authority over? But what if we don't know what real power is? And because we don't, we're often handed off into a sense of being powerless that only produces time and time again a way in which we seek ways to control our condition instead of transcending the consciousness producing it. So I want to just say one more thing before I actually start the material that I plan to share with you. It's so important that all of us understand that we are not trying with these talks or any of the material that I present to find some magic bullet, some way in which we're going to suddenly perfect ourselves and be rid of the feeling of being powerless or anxious or worried. What we're talking about and will talk about is how we can align ourselves with the principles that are already perfect across the universe and in this world and operating in you and I, so that in that alignment, we are brought into a new relationship within ourselves and the world that we're in. And that new relationship is the source of the power we seek that can never be made to feel powerless. So let's see where we can go from here. Take a nice deep breath, everybody. True spiritual power isn't the ability to imagine or implement an endless series of new solutions to old problems. We know that. Rather, it's a radical, higher form of self-understanding, one that illuminates and transcends our unconscious need to have painful problems at all. I mean, which would you rather have? A personal fire truck and a fire to put out every day? Or a life that has no painful fires in it at all? The truth is, most of us spend a great deal of our time struggling, in vain I might add, to sort out one conflict or another with others, with the world, or within ourselves. Part of our ever-developing plan to win these wars requires that we acquire new powers, things that we imagine will empower us to end our suffering once and for all. But past experience proves these exercises to be pointless. The very thing that we set out to obtain to make us fearless, to relieve us of our stress and anxiety, soon becomes the source of a new fear and a new pressure. No path, no process that we've ever given to ourselves to free ourselves from some suffering has ever actually succeeded, other than delivering us to where we have to try again to find that same way past a problem that didn't exist until we acquired that new idea or image, that new path. It's not unlike an addict taking his drug of choice to release himself from that cyclical pain of his addiction. So we continue to seek powers outside of us to free us from feeling powerless in the face of what pains us. It's obvious that no drug the addict wants can free him from the drugs that he wants. What isn't so obvious, though, is the following. Each power we imagine will liberate us only strengthens our false belief that the power we need to free ourselves is somewhere outside of us, in someone else's hands, or in some tomorrow yet to come. We have no idea of the power with which we have been endowed. Within us, in each of us, dwells the possibility of realizing a level of consciousness whose freedom has no contingencies, one that cannot fall apart even when the conditions in our lives seem to come undone, as they do in the shock of any crisis. This special kind of power has nothing to do with being able to control or manipulate conditions outside of us. We're talking about authority over our own runaway negative reactions. That's a completely different kind of power, isn't it? To possess ourselves, as opposed to trying to possess things or relationships, possessions, through which we seek a measure of security, but never actually secure it. The power to possess ourselves can't be granted by anyone or anything outside of us. All powers of the worldly order are powerless to grant us what our heart of hearts wants more than anything else, which is to quietly be in charge of our own heart and our own mind. So the next time that you're overcome with a feeling as if you're powerless, take this one interior action and watch how that fear disappears. Take a nice deep breath. Instead of looking at what your fear is telling you is greater than your power to deal with it, for instance, a relationship that's falling apart, a brewing storm of some kind because of unforeseen changes in the world around you, or a pending loss of some kind, instead of looking at what your fear is telling you to consider, instead look at the part of you that wants you to believe that who you are is inadequate to meet the challenge at hand. Then remember this truth. All feelings of being powerless are the false projections of a frightened level of consciousness that is not you and never has been, but has continued to steal your life, my life, everyone's life, by the endless ways in which it sees problems that then it alone has the power to resolve, or that it alone crumbles beneath for the weight of its own dark imagining. Real spiritual power is knowing that no moment is greater than your divine right to call upon an indwelling light, call it what you will, an awareness, some part of our consciousness that for what it brings into the moment with itself transforms any darkness that it touches into something bright, true, good, and most importantly, free. Please join me for the next talk that we're going to have on this topic. I'll see you in a little while. Be well. Hi, this is Guy, and I hope that you're ready for the next part of our study in how to never feel powerless again. In this next session, we're going to talk about something that so many of us feel so often but don't know what to do about it. And I'm talking about the sense of being inadequate to the challenge of the moment, because after all, what is feeling powerless if not facing something that seems greater than our ability to deal with it? So let's look at how we can transcend that terrible feeling of suddenly finding ourselves without knowing what to do or who we are or where to go, and instead ground ourselves in something that gives us everything we need in that moment to be a completely different human being, empowered by something altogether new and different within ourselves. So have you ever noticed how the more negative you get, the more difficult everything about your life becomes? I mean, even the simplest things. We've all been there and done that. It's like kind of sinking into some kind of molasses where not only can't we move, but almost everything that we don't want seems stuck to us. To the spiritually uninitiated, if you will, it feels as if we've been dropped into a river of pure resistance. But in truth, we haven't been dropped anywhere. We're being pulled into a level of consciousness that wants us to look at that challenge and moment as an adversary. That's always the knee-jerk reaction with an unwanted moment. Something is challenging me, what I want, what I believe should be. But it's never the adversary. Rather, we are deceived into negatively perceiving the moment that way, so that instead of realizing the kind of power we have given to us in that same moment, we struggle in order to overcome a sense of being inadequate in the face of that moment, because we've been convinced that somehow or other our present limitations are far too great for us to get over. But where are we getting the idea of those limitations, if not from some picture our mind is showing us in that same moment about who we are and what we've been, and most likely similarities in our past where we didn't pass the test of that moment. But here's where we're going. In those moments where we feel inadequate, as if somehow or other we don't have the power it takes, the fact of the moment is otherwise. Those moments are actually an invitation from the divine, from the higher part of our own consciousness, to realize that those limitations belong to a level of consciousness that we can leave behind us. So regardless the nature of the trial, that whatever it is that's set before you, that same moment isn't saying you're stuck and confined. It's really saying, would you like to live in a larger world, one without that fear or sense of inadequacy? We may not yet be able to hear these questions as I'm describing them, but they are always present at what I would call the point of impact. Whenever some event reveals a limitation of ours that we brought with us into the moment, and let's not kid ourselves, we're not pretending we don't have limitations. We're just not going to be deceived into believing them anymore. You'll find in those moments, and you fill in the blank, if you will, that in that unwanted condition is a certain kind of thought or feeling that tells us we have to deal with it on its terms. But what really are the terms of that condition other than what our own consciousness is telling us has happened? We can outgrow that consciousness. That's what this talk is about, and all of the talks that I give. The realization that what we're facing in that moment of challenge is a level of consciousness that is unaware of itself actually changes everything. Why? Because instead of hoping that we don't encounter a moment like that again where we feel inadequate or limited, we look at that moment as the possibility that it actually offers to us. And what is that? All seemingly impassable moments in our life are actually a predestined place for us to meet and outgrow the level of ourselves that used to stand in front of it feeling inadequate. Think about what I've said. Life doesn't bring us obstacles. It brings us points of contact where we can realize an aspect of our consciousness we're being invited to change through an awareness of it made only possible in moments like that. Freedom is not found ever by fighting with what we think stands in our way. Our true spiritual liberation rests within this one unthinkable realization. What is in our way is actually a part of the way. Once that's understood, and we can understand that, whatever seems to be set against us has actually been put there for us to outgrow it. The more we recognize the opportunity in those moments that seem to pit everything against us, the nearer we are to perfecting our relationship with an interior awareness, a divine consciousness, call it what you will, that has brought us to that moment, opened that moment up in front of us so that we could accept the invitation to change the consciousness being revealed by it. And the more we are willing to go into those moments and become fully awake, conscious of ourselves, including the parts of us pointing to the situation and saying, see, I told you, there it is again, you're never going to get past it. The moment you see that what's pointing at the problem is actually the problem itself, the nearer you are to finding out the whole thing has been done for you. We transcend the feeling of being inadequate by discovering it belongs to a level of consciousness that needs to feel that way so that it can continue to live out its life at the expense of our own highest possibilities. I hope to see you in the next and last talk in this series of how to never feel powerless again. Thanks for joining me. Hi, this is Guy. Welcome back, and I hope that you have been able to derive some meaningful understanding and new actions from the material we've covered so far. And just to refresh what we've been talking about, we're looking at how the root of any crisis, not just the current one, but of all those conditions that we seem to crash into in life, are all rooted in a sudden sense of feeling powerless in some way or another, inadequate, as we just talked about in the last session. And we've been looking at what if what we have always thought as being power really isn't power at all, but something that we have embraced without knowing it, some idea, some belief, some opinion, an image, that for our unconscious embrace of that idea has left us feeling powerless when that was never necessary, as, again, we're about to prove to ourselves in our last session, which is called Take Full Possession of Yourself. It's a little known secret that our experience of life in any given moment is a direct reflection of what we actually value in that same moment. Now, we may deny this truth because it's unsettling, but when it comes to what we are in relationship with, inwardly and outwardly, actions speak louder than words. And seen or not, all actions are a choice of one kind or another. Nothing in the universe can make us choose to act against ourselves, as in when we consort with self-compromising negative states. Living in sorrow, in anger, awash with regrets, or that constant sense of feeling inadequate because some challenge seems to be greater than our ability to deal with it, living with those kind of negative states is a consensual affair. Nothing is being made to us that cannot be unmade when we understand that truth. Those dark states that I've just described, that appear always in the moment of a crisis, they never dance alone. They must have a partner to produce the kind of pain that they do. And that brings us, if you will, to some good news. We're released from the dark embrace of any unhappy thought or feeling in the same exact moment we see that we've been tricked into dancing with that troubled state, into a world where the only thing that comes out of it is what we are left with, which is usually feeling inadequate and powerless. So to that end, we're going to look at 4 very special insights to help you choose in favor of higher self-awareness so that your new partner in the moment of a crisis isn't some painful thought or feeling telling you that you're never going to get through it, but rather that something walks you through it, showing you, without doubt, that who and what you are is already endowed with all of the interior power, the awareness that you need to transform that unwanted moment into something that changes your relationship with it and yourself for the rest of your life. So let's take the first of these 4 insights. When you want peace within yourself, more than you want to feel agitated over unwanted events taking place within or around you, come wide awake and quietly ask yourself, as consciously as you're able, is this agitation something I want to live with now or tomorrow? Or would I be better off living without it? Look how simple that is. I become aware of myself as best I can, aware of that thought or feeling that's full of agitation, and I just ask myself, through the awareness of that condition, do I really want to live with this state, or am I better without it? And when through your awareness your answer is clear, so is your choice. And in that same moment appears the peace of heart and mind for which you long and which you had unknowingly given away. That's what it means to take full possession of ourselves, is to realize that we have been giving ourselves away without knowing it. And once we're aware of it, we simply take ourselves back. Number 2, when you want to be at ease with yourself around friends and strangers alike, more than you want that uneasy feeling that comes with fawning to win their approval, come wide awake, right on the spot, maybe at the dinner table, a restaurant, wherever you are, in a car, and just quietly ask yourself as consciously as you're able, is this painful sense of inadequacy coming from a place of strength or from weakness? That's all. Just aware of something in you telling you about yourself, that because of what it's telling you, it's also telling you what you have to do to escape it. It's all evident in that moment. And when your answer is clear, that you're not coming from a place of strength, but rather something is coming at you that's weak, so will your choice be in that moment. And you will reclaim that quiet self-command for which you long, according to your level of awareness of the same. Let's go to number 3. When you want to be patient with others, more than you want to feel frustrated over their inability to please you, come wide awake and quietly ask yourself, as consciously as you're able to, is this feeling of impatience good for me? Or is it good for anyone around me? And when in that same awareness you know by the pain inherent in that impatient state that that's not good for you, let alone those that you love or care about, in that same moment, born of that same light of awareness, your answer's clear. And when your answer's clear, so is your choice. And in that moment when you choose to remain aware of what is weakening you because you didn't know that you were being invited to do that, you'll know exactly what it means to regain a kind of forbearance, a patience that's not just healing for you, but for everyone involved. And lastly, number 4, when you want to share in the fullness of the present moment, more than you want that terrible sinking feeling that somehow or other you're missing out on life, come wide awake and quietly ask yourself, again, as consciously as you're able to, is this fear that life is passing me by helping me in any way whatsoever? Does this fear know anything at all about what it means to be complete in the here and now? Or is this fear telling me that somewhere down the line, if I do what it tells me to do, that then I'll be complete? We already know the answer, but we forget to ask the question, because any and all of these moments where we are temporarily possessed by a relationship that we're unconscious with our own nature, we simply forget the truth. And when we know the truth, it sets us free. In this instance, fear doesn't know how to make you whole. Fear can never complete you. It never has, and it never will. To see that as so, your choice follows. And when your choice is to be aware of and then drop that relationship, in that same moment you drop that unfriendly relationship, you make friends with an unshakable sense of wholeness, what you've been looking for all along. In this life, there is no greater power, nor is there ever a need for any other than your divine right to consciously detect and then drop any form of fear, worry, or dark self-doubt. I hope that you've been able to work with these principles that we presented in the last 3 series of talks. And if you will listen to them again, each time you will take something new from what you listened to the time before, because you'll have changed something in your consciousness for your willingness to work with the ideas. That's my wish for you and our hope as human beings, to change the kind of consciousness we're living from, so that we no longer live feeling ever again as if we're powerless in the face of some condition greater than we are. Thanks. Bye.